out of the first 100 clients I got, I think 80% or 90% were from street surveys and cold prospecting. There have been maybe weeks where I went to talk to 300, 400, 500 people. You don't get a single person to meet you.
That's a 1% conversion rate. Most marketers will quit, but Marcus turns those rejections into a system that now runs almost entirely on word of mouth. Here's how he did it.
So being able to anchor myself on the feelings and the emotions that's tied to the last time that something successful happened, and the energy that you have can really translate to whether an outcome is positive or negative.
Later in this episode, Marcus reveals why his shift from posting achievements and testimonials to raw and authentic content on Instagram actually led to him getting more clients. But real quick, smash that subscribe button. Every week we're diving into it with people who are building real businesses. Make sure you don't miss out. Welcome back to Horizons Podcast, where I convince marketing leaders to spill their secrets for the rest of us. I'm your host, Nate Desmond, and today I'm sitting down with Marcus Go. Marcus is an amazing financial consultant here in Singapore, who's also very involved in a running community. And on top of that, he is a friend of mine from church. Marcus, my first question for you is, you've mentioned in an article that discipline isn't about willpower, it's about identity, which I think is a really important thing we miss sometimes. How does this philosophy shape the way you think about building relationships as a financial consultant?
Wow, okay. First of all, thank you for having me. I think identity is something that it's so core to how you behave, right? Because like everything stems from how you view yourself, the kind of words we use to describe ourselves, or the kind of words that we think about of ourselves can heavily influence the way that we act, right? And I think the way we act will then become sort of habitual. I guess how identity and discipline is related is that if you are constantly just forcing yourself to act against what you think about yourself, then it can be a very tiresome thing, because it always feels like you're swimming against the wave which is in your mind, right? What you're telling yourself. I think a personal story I can share regarding that is the identity I had around smoking. I used to be a heavy smoker. I don't know if have I shared this with you guys before?
I think you have.
I have, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's not something I'm proud of. I think nicotine can be a very sinister thing that's promoted to look cool and to sort of be masculine. And I guess that's also a good point to bring up, that, I think looking cool and masculine, how I tied that as part of the smoker's identity was very key to why I continued smoking. Because there was always this sort of association with being relaxed, being cool, being chill, I mean, we have it in Hollywood, right? You see the star of the movie pulling up in a car and walking out and, taking a drag on the cigarette. So I think that formed a lot of sort of, what I looked at smoking as a young kid. And that's what kept me, I think, smoking for a long time, is that I always thought of myself as a smoker who was trying to quit. So the difference between that statement and how eventually when I was able to stop smoking was really a shift in that statement from I'm a smoker trying to quit to I'm not a smoker. Yeah. So I'm trying to not smoke is a very different statement than I am not a smoker. So I think from that aspect of like using sort of the identity shift to kick a bad habit. I wouldn't say a bad habit, it was an addiction. Let's call it what it is, right? It's an addiction. And I was quite heavily addicted, because like it took me like 7 or 8 tries before I finally, encountered this sort of system of thinking. I was from a book, actually. I read a book which kind of gave me that perspective of, shifting your identity as a smoker. So I think how identity then plays into building relationships with clients. It's also about what you tell yourself that you are, right? Are you someone who is positive? Are you someone who is lovable? Are you someone who is able to serve? Are you someone who's competent? Like, what are the thoughts, or what's the identity that you have regarding this? And that can heavily influence how you act around people, and thus then influence the relationships that you have with them. Hopefully answers the question. That was a long answer. Hopefully answers the...
That is a far more impactful answer than I expected. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And it is really interesting how much our behavior in all sorts of ways is very impacted by how we see ourselves, which is why I loved that quote when I came across it. And you see this in so many different ways, in negative ways, like I am this, and so I keep doing this habit I don't want to do, or I am capable of learning new skills. And so like I was just reading about someone earlier today who came to the UK, realized all the cars were in manual at the particular rental counter they're at, and they decided to just learn how to drive a manual car that day. and they learned it with the rental car live as they drove, which for many of us sounds very
That
daunting.
sounds crazy. Yeah.
But they had an identity of, I'm the kind of person who can figure this out. And so it's just an easy thing for them to do. So I love that side of it. And I also love the other side of thinking about when you're trying to grow a product or a business of any sort, it takes a long time. Like you mentioned, taking multiple tries to kick the habit of smoking. In the same way, to a much larger degree, it often takes a long time to have an impact in changing the behavior of whoever we want to change to use our product, to be our client in a consulting service. It can
Mm.
take a long time to change that. And so it shows the importance of having many different touch points, trying again and again. Lastly, I think it also highlights a really important part of, are we growing something that's valuable to users? Because you mentioned things like the Hollywood celebrity smoking, which is marketing, and it's very negative marketing that hurts people around the world. And so when we're doing growth and trying to build something, are we building something that's actually helpful to people? Or are we building something that is maybe hurtful to the people that we're helping?
Yeah.
And the stuff you're doing is incredibly helpful because you're, as I understand it, basically a financial consultant who helps people build their financial lives in a stable way. What drew you to this field initially?
Wow, that's a really good question I've been thinking about recently. In fact, I don't know why. Was it you or like I had a dream about somebody asking me that question in almost a specific way that you just asked me? What drew me to this field? It was initially the income. Like it was purely that to start with, to be able to leverage, what I thought at that point was the best avenue for me to grow my income and sort of parallel to that to grow my skill in the marketplace. So my manager, he was the one who brought me into the industry. What I saw in him was someone capable of handling his finances and being able to advise on mine. And I was very impressed about, how he went about it. And I think that's where it started from, being wanting to be able to be someone who feels financially able and financially stable as well. I thought the best way to go about learning it was to learn how to teach it.
True.
And yeah, I mean, of course, you start off at the product level of, what financial products are. There's investment products, insurance products, savings products. But I think what grew beyond that, and I think it aligns with what you mentioned about what are you actually building for, right? Like, what are you building a business, or what you selling a service for? Like, is it to really help society or help your customer achieve what they want, help them to find clarity, or is it for maximizing profits? Because I mean, clearly with smoking, there is no intention for the customer's well-being, right? It's about doing all the marketing, and I guess you can say the whole business is basically to the profit of the business owners. And I think if you have, I mean, the world operates on money after all, but I guess it really comes down to us as individuals within the corporations that we choose to be in, to see how we can align what we do with what we so our own purpose.
What I'd love to take that next is, I think very often when people are building businesses, they have these sorts of interviews. Once they're like you, they're successful, they've kicked it off, they've shown that they know something. But by that point, they often are at a very different stage than people who are starting out. And the advice that they gave may not actually be relevant to someone who's just starting out. So I'm curious, if we go back to the beginning, what are the things that you wish you knew when you were just starting to build your practice that you don't know or that you didn't know at that time?
Okay, I think I have two that I can think of. One is systems, which is, knowing what I know now. I feel like if I were to go back in time, I would have focused more on building systems to support my work. In a way, setting up certain filing procedures, setting up certain administrative procedures in certain ways that um would sort of benefit me. Because I realize, looking back, that there's a lot of time wasted in um, not having proper systems. I mean, I'm not saying I have perfect systems right now. I'm still a learning journey of, correcting some of the poorly formed habits, especially, when it comes to, systems that we use online. But the second part, I would say, going back, I would say it's a mindset, because I think I approached the business with so much like but I guess again, perhaps it was what was needed then, because it was a do or die kind of mindset when I went in. It was an all or nothing. If I don't make it here, I would fail, and therefore it drove me to act and really hustle hard for at least the first, I would say, 3 or 4 years of my business. But I guess I really had to go through that journey to come to this point, to realize that what I would have told myself, I don't know, maybe give myself 2 years of hard work, right, and then I would have told myself to not forget the point of that hard work, not lose track of what you're working hard for. Because I think at one point I got myself really burnt out. I was pushing a lot of hours and making a lot of work happen that I didn't feel particularly compelled to do, because it felt like everything started to feel like work. Yeah. So I guess what I would tell myself is then, focus on, building sustainable systems, because then, I mean, that will help the second part, which is to have a healthy mindset about what you're doing, because it doesn't feel overwhelming. It should be something that you are drawn to. It aligns with your mission, and you feel excited, and the work itself can motivate you. At one point where in my career, I think meeting people became something that I felt like it started to become tedious, which sucked, right? Because, I think in my industry, it's really a personal business where meeting people is part of the work.
And I think two things. First, on your second point, I think it's so common for people to say, oh, if you go back in time, or if I were to go back in time, I'd tell myself to relax more. And exactly as you said, so often if our past selves did relax more, our present self wouldn't be here in the way that we are right now. So it's easy to give that advice once you've reached a certain level of success.
Yeah.
It may not be actually the best advice for people who are not there. So I love the way that you thought about that piece, and like when it is valuable to work more, but maybe at year 3, taking more of a different perspective. I also love the systems piece. One piece I think is really interesting there that you brought to mind for me is even just doing this podcast, a super simple thing. In each of the episodes I published, I put out like, here's where you can find out more about this person, link 1, link 2, link 3, whatever links we have. And doing that only takes like 30 seconds, right? To copy paste, write it up, done. But then when I actually took the time to automate it, because I have everything in a spreadsheet, and so I already know the links, I know the person's name. If I just automate the writing of that summary, it saves 30 seconds each time. But if I'm doing an episode every week, that's saving me like 50 times 30, 25 minutes of time that year, which is still not that much. We add that up over a few different automations and suddenly realize I can actually do a lot more with this automation, and it's less boring because copy pasting links is not necessarily the most riveting of tasks.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, you're saving yourself, like you said, 25 minutes a year. But if, everyone that were to have to go through that same process were to learn how you use that automation and start to use that in accomplishing the same task, then you've saved, 25 minutes times the number of people. So imagine if like all the podcasters were to get together and, be able to share the different automations that save them, like you said, serves you 30 seconds. But, without thinking about it, and that's, I guess the limitation of AI is that AI is not operating on the ground with, it's not clicking buttons in the way that we click buttons. So we face certain friction that we learn to overcome in certain ways that saves us time. But imagine that, if you could build a database or start to accumulate knowledge for specific tasks or processes that everyone can benefit from. I mean, I guess for the financial consulting field, and I think this is something that I feel is missing, and I'm excited to think about how to start to bring it together, is if with different consultants having different experiences on the ground and learning about different processes, and there are a few processes then, that follow certain guidelines that definitely you can being able to access that without, you're able to access that database of how to do it without having to, and like, the best way to do it because, you've already accumulated a sort of digital bank of experiences of different consultants that, encounter the same problem, and you can then provide the best solution to accomplish a certain objective. Yeah. And I feel like this is something that can be applied for not just in the field that of our industry I'm in, but I think in a lot of industries, I think is how can you start to pull the knowledge together so that we can start to get better outcomes for the people that are relying on this.
It's an exciting idea. And I think it's also fascinating to me how, for many of us who are using AI, it can sometimes feel like, oh, there's no moat here. Anyone could do this. It's very easy to do. And it is if you're really good at AI, or some of it is. But a lot of people are not really good at AI and don't want to become really good at AI. They just want their problem solved. And so then when you do something like this, you solve their problem, and they would much rather you solve their problem than that they have to go use AI to solve their problem. So it is really a very defensible and important business to be building. Pivoting just slightly, I'm curious, in financial consulting, how do you find your clients?
Currently, I rely quite purely on word of mouth. People who are my existing clients telling others about me. I have a few really, at this point, I'll consider them friends more than clients, right? Because, they become your advocates for the the things that you've been able to do for them or the experience that they've had, being able to speak to you. And yeah, I think a lot of my business comes really from word of mouth. I think other than that, I do sometimes get people messaging me on my Instagram, directly, but that's rare and far between. A lot of it still comes from word of mouth. I think interestingly, in this digital age that we live in, I feel like word of mouth still has still really powerful in bringing referrals or new customers into your business. Yeah.
True. And it's interesting when you take any business, like whether you're a home repair company or you're a massive internet technology company, there are a few components that are always the same that you always need in every business. And distribution is one of the biggest. If you can find clients, then you're going to be doing well. You also have to deliver the service and it becomes the whole cycle.
Mm-mm.
Regardless of where you are, this finding of clients is super critical. And also, regardless of where you are, word of mouth is so often the most powerful because these are the best quality leads. They're most likely to convert. They already know what to expect. If you were to start over, how would you try to grow clients if you had no reputation?
Oh, that's a very relevant question because that's how actually I started. Because I decided at the early part of my career, especially such a career, I think it's something elephant in the room. Being a financial consultant in Singapore, um, there is still some sort of negative connotation to the industry for the reason that because largely at least in Asia, I mean in fact in Singapore, most of the consultants are still commission based distribution channels, you make a living from being able to close a deal, and with that then comes that incentive issue of are you closing deals to make, again, right back to that conversation about profits, and are you doing it for your customers good? You can maximize profits at the cost or expense of your customers in the short run, but in the long run that's a poor strategy. But like where I started, because of the negative connotation, I really didn't want to sort of go word of mouth. I didn't want to get like people to um that know me, or I guess we call it warm market, right? In the industry, we call it warm market. People who already know you or somehow have a relationship to you. So I didn't want to put the pressure on them, the obligation to you to have to do business because of some relationship we used to share. So I started building my business really on the cold market, where from street surveys and interviews and roadshows, and it's where I built a solid base of clients before then, being able to serve these clients and then having the opportunity to serve the people around them. Yeah. So I mean that's how I started. But
What does
however,
that look like? You mentioned street service, interviews, road shows. What does that actually look like? You're on the street distributing flyers, or
I
how do you
mean
do that?
you if you're in Singapore and you go to any of the local heartland malls, MRT stations, right? You see a sales booth, right? Either property or insurance company
Yes.
or financial company, and that's really common. But previous to, I mean, before COVID, in fact, it was allowed. Like it's now something that is regulated, and I believe it's not. Yeah, it's regulated, so you can't actually do it without approval. Is just being stationed at any MRT station, and you're just doing financial service for obtaining uh potential, I mean, prospecting, like, basically potential customers. So yeah, I used to do that. Like that was how I started my first 2 years of financial consulting. I think, in fact, I think the first out of the first 100 clients I got, I think 80% or 90% were from street surveys and cold prospecting.
That's incredible. How would you, like, someone walks out of the MRT, the subway, or someone walks into a mall, how would you identify this is someone who might be interested? And then how would you initiate a conversation?
I think the strategy, because it's such a laborious kind of job because you're on your feet and you're moving around. So how you identify is you don't really pick. You just talk to everyone that you can first, and then through that you start to get an intuition or sort of a sensing of who could be potential people that can be customers. So yeah, I mean, in fact, like in the beginning, like the training was to just learn to talk to people. I think in our culture, and I mean, especially being, in Asian culture, you don't really say hi to strangers too much. So what helped me to not have to get into decision fatigue was to just talk to everyone. Yeah.
Well, that's smart. So you don't have to decide each time, do I talk to this person or not? Is like pre-decided, I'm going to talk to everybody.
Yeah, of course, with certain boundaries. I mean, if the person is like a child or a student, like those people I'm not doing a financial survey with. But as long as they look like maybe they at least look like they're an intern, or they're employed, then I would likely say hi to them.
And what would be a good closing rate? Like, let's say you spend, I don't know how you would normally do it, maybe a day doing this.
Wow.
How many
That's a
clients would
good
you hope to
question. Yeah,
sign?
this is like almost like not something that I think most people talk about. It ranges, I think, when I have colleagues who,
And by the way, don't feel like you need to talk about it. If it's like
no,
something you don't
I'm,
want to share, that's also fine.
yeah, no, this is, I think it's interesting because I think for me, out of 100 people that I get to talk to, I probably meet like, I remember it was maybe less than 10%. Yeah.
It's quite
So,
good. You would
yeah.
close just under 10%.
No, no, that's not close. Just talk, like get the next
Or
meeting.
talk to. Okay, okay, the
Yes.
top of the funnel.
Yeah. So to get the next meeting, I think less than 10%, let's just say like 9%, less than 10%, I remember it was. And then out of that, maybe one that would eventually become a client. So if you were to count from like the 100 people I speak to on the street, I think would probably be 1%, like one out of it or two out of 100 people. Yeah.
Nice. That's quite good. And it's interesting, especially for someone like myself who hasn't done, I've done a little bit of sales, but I've not really done sales.
Mm.
It's very easy to talk to 50 people and then none of them work. And you're like, well, right off this doesn't work. But
Yeah.
actually, it's that 1 in 100, you need to put in a lot of reps to get there. And the
Yeah.
thing
No.
that I found most interesting with this is sales is really everywhere. Even if it's not the main job that we do sales in so many different ways. And being able to take the rejection and not say, well, this doesn't work, but say, okay, I need to keep trying is very, very
Mm.
difficult.
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like marketing is I don't know if marketers or salespeople will be like coming at me for this, but I feel like it's a form of sales, right? You're trying to convince or communicate something and sell an idea, right? Ultimately, you're trying to, yeah, bring some kind of brand to awareness. You're trying to create, yeah, you're still trying to sell something. You're trying to bring something to the awareness of someone else. But
How did you
I
handle the rejection?
it was a lot of like mental preparation. But I have to add on before we move into how I prepared or like how I handled the rejection is that it's not like a hundred and then you get one person, right? Because there have been maybe weeks where I went like I'll talk to 300, 400, 500 people and you don't get a single person to meet you. And you can end up having like 20 people that you talk to in a row that maybe 80% of them want to meet you. So, things can change very rapidly. And there are bouts of time where you literally go through just phases of barren nothingness. And I guess to then your point that it can feel very discouraging. I think from, I mean, a marketing standpoint also, you can be posting on social media, you can be running campaigns, you can be doing a lot of things, but the results kind of, it doesn't and you get, I guess the idea is to keep your eye on the goal and keep the faith and believe that, that one post, that one campaign, that one thing that you commit to is gonna to come true. I guess how to manage that, develop a faith in what you're doing, because it was really a practice in faith when I was in, I mean, that especially at first 2 years of business, that I left it to God, really, whether the day turned out well or not. All I can do is, and that's so true, because at that point of time, I literally, I guess, yeah, especially in the first 2 years, I don't know, like passion drove me so much that like I would be 6 a.m. and like my eyes would be up and I'd be like ready to go. And like, I guess that's where I gave myself that sort of, knowing that I did my best and then having that strong faith kept me going in times where, like, even though I did my best, there's nothing that's happening. And
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
How would you maintain that in like a 2 week stretch of no one wanting to do a
What
follow
then?
up meeting?
Right. I think the top of my mind, I can think of is the practice of reflection and gratitude. To think about previous times where there was success, and I don't know where this term comes from. I think it's NLP, anchoring. So being able to anchor myself on the feelings and the emotions that's tied to the last time that something successful happened, and try to bring that emotion and that state to mind how I approach the next person. Because I think, especially when it comes to yeah, like real life, you're standing on your feet and you're talking to people in person, the energy that you have can really translate to whether an outcome is positive or negative. Yeah, I did a lot of like mental anchoring, mental preparation through I would listen to songs. I mean, I don't know how relevant that would be, but I feel like being able to bring myself in the right state of mind, a productive state of mind, through listening to songs that inspire me or motivate or bring up my energy, can really change how I sort of interacted with the work that I have to do. So yeah, I'm not so sure. Like, I think in the office as well, I sometimes when I go into the office, I'm like, why is it so quiet? I don't know if it's the same in your office, but I'm like I feel like we need environments that are more like, music can change the energy of how you approach anything. I think when I especially when I did the street interviews and surveys, I would like when I'm going to the location, just plug in my earphones and like spend 10 minutes just listening to songs that kind of hype me up or inspired me.
It reminds me of a study I read a while ago, and I'll have to fact check this later because I don't remember how accurate the study was, but it's very interesting. It basically said, I think it was doctors that they studied, and they found that the doctors were more accurate in whatever they're doing, probably like a medical test, if they were wearing lab coats compared to if they're just wearing normal clothes. And it showed that the clothes we put on do help us to think about who we are. Am I a doctor if I'm wearing a lab coat? Am I a painter if I'm wearing a painter smock? And that actually changes the outcomes in a very similar way to what you're talking about. How do we set our minds has a big impact on the outcome.
Yeah, yeah. I think the environment and the yeah, I guess it ties back to identity because the uniform or the clothes that we put on is identity. It's an identity statement. It's ultimately it's costumes, right? Because like why a polo tee or why Mandarin collar, like our clothes could have been designed very differently, but when we put it on, we sort of kind of put on a identity as well. Yeah, I mean, it was actually something that like I'm glad you brought it up because like I used to, I would be very selective about like how I dressed because like I wanted to make sure I felt good and like whenever almost like it becomes a bit of a ritual, even putting on like clothes, especially when I need to be in a certain state of mind. So yeah, I think it makes sense. Doctors in lab coats probably work better than doctors in any other.
That is fascinating. Okay, I'm curious, once you have these people signed, you put in the work to get the signers, you get your first clients. How did you manage retention on those first clients? And what did you learn about like the clients that you could help versus the clients that maybe weren't such a good fit, about what keeps the client around for years versus the clients who don't stick around? What were those early years of retention like?
Wow, it's still a learning journey for me. I have to say, like it's still something that I mean, over the years, I'm learning new things about how to build better systems. I mean, yeah, I guess the answer to that is systems. Like how do you have proper systems in place to reduce the amount of friction of providing services or getting in touch with your clients. So I mean, a few simple systems I use is I do have access to it's a CRM. Basically, you have access to your clients' birthdays. It's a very it's a very simple thing that I built, which is I do have a whole, how I put it. Let me reverse my answer to that, and maybe we can start from here. How I manage
Absolutely.
my clients' retention. I mean, is finding as many potential points of being in touch with them or being in their lives as possible. I mean, especially in our field of work, how many times you can appear in their mind space so that we sort of stay relevant in their lives. So it can happen in forms of gifting. So birthdays, we do give clients gifts, but that also evolves over time because, yeah, the interesting thing about, receiving gifts without any true intention or word behind it, it becomes just like, it doesn't add too much value after you repeat it over a certain amount of time. But I think how to manage retention, especially in our field, is really being in our clients' lives. And I think that's where it ties to social media and why I'm quite focused on, building a page where I uh can share a bit of my life so that my clients can stay connected to it. And that's given me a lot of joy because like the people who are interested in my life and I know I guess happy clients is are people who I can stay connected and can stay interested in my life and I can stay interested in life, vice versa. We end up developing a deeper client and advisor relationship. And that's, I mean, I guess to tie back to the business that I do, I think it's a very personal business and it goes beyond the products because if it's product sales and product focused only, anyone would serve that purpose. But I think a lot of the work that we do, especially in our field, is more than product. It's really, I mean, at some point it can be very intimate, the medical conditions that someone's going through, the struggles that they might be going through, not just financially, the concerns they have, but physically, the pain that they're going through. And I think it's a very high touch industry where I feel bad to even call what we do, like the words leads and prospects and all that, because to me, each person that we meet is a potential person that you can really change your life of and like impact. I think then where it comes from, I think at least in retention, is to build systems to consistently stay in touch with your clients. Through gifting is one of them, social media is another one of them. But I think ultimately it also comes to intention. It comes from the heart of the advisor, and I think like it really then it's also a sort of reflection of myself. Like to stay in the intention of being in touch with the clients that I have. Yeah.
And I love how it almost sounds like I'm picking up two levels of engagement. There's the baseline level of like, do they know that I exist? Do they know that I care about them? It's from my Instagram, from gifts I send. And then there's the spiky period of something went wrong, and hopefully it doesn't go wrong. But if it does, that's a huge moment to show up and help them in a time when no one else is necessarily in their corner. No one else understands the health system as much as you do. And you fit that perfect place of being a person who's in their corner and understands the health system in a moment of need and can help them navigate, which I suspect is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I think you have very correctly pointed out like what I mean, not only is that it like during such times it becomes the highest impact times, that you can provide value to your client, but like on the other hand, it's also something that I feel gives us, at least in my job, so much meaning, right? Because yeah, like you're the person that they call in their time of need. And being able to be in that position, it's a great responsibility. It's also, I mean, it's a huge privilege as well to have that position in their life. And I like to say, I mean, I hope that if my clients end up listening to this, that that they can put me on their speed dial and give me a ring if they ever need. I always tell that to the clients, that I have, that if it's really an emergency, my value to you is to be able to be available to you. Yeah, but I mean, I am very aware of the danger of that. Like I being able to follow through on that commitment is a high call. And ultimately, I mean, I also like to joke that who knows, I'm the person with, I do have a health condition. I am older than some of my clients, so who knows, I'm not here before, I'm not there where the help is needed. And I think that comes back to being able to build systems that my clients can trust, that ultimately, if I'm not in the picture, there's something else that's there to take care of me.
It's incredible. And that is so powerful in seeing how personal those relationships are.
Yeah, it is.
I'm sure most of the time clients are wonderful, but in moments of high stress, when everything's going wrong and they need help the most, I'm sure emotions are also quite high at times. How do you manage your emotions and make the situation go well when someone may be like, Marcus, I need help right now. I can't believe you're not helping me. How do
Yeah,
you
wow,
how
that's
do you
such
actually help
a
them in that moment?
you're asking so good question. I mean, that's honestly, wow, that's such a good question. I've never, wow, never had that question before. But it is a very good like perspective to have, because it's true. It happens a lot, especially during times where there's urgency, or there's, yeah. I mean, literally, you're in pain, you're struggling, something's happening. It can get very emotional. One thing I've been doing recently, I guess, and I think any corporate person who needs to reply to clients would do, is to do a first layer filter of, like, how you would express your thoughts. I put it through ChatGPT and get it to kind of, I mean, of course, removing any kind of specific information, right? But getting a good sense of how to express yourself to in a clear, concise manner, removing your own emotion, because it can get emotional. Because I mean, ultimately people can get defensive, you can get offensive, you can get frustrating, and fingers will start, people start pointing fingers. Yeah, and then when it comes to insurance, it's also true, because ultimately it comes to that. We have a policy with certain boundaries, and then it's how you can also make sense of these boundaries to the clients who might not remember these boundaries, or end of the day, sometimes TNCs, it's a 67-page document. You never know what you're going to be affected by. So I think also having technology to help me, to support me in that, to be able to clearly communicate the facts without emotion, is something that's been helpful. Yeah, but I guess in the past, it's really learning through mistakes, learning through realizing that hey, I'm getting emotional, I'm getting drawn down to becoming frustrated. So how do I detach myself from this? How do I detach from myself from how emotional this situation might be? Yeah.
It's amazing. Switching somewhat, you mentioned Instagram, and you also are a pacer for a run club here in Singapore. I want to touch on those two elements. Maybe first starting with Instagram. What first got you into Instagram? It sounded like it was this building of relationships with your clients and also just generally trying out a new thing. And how have you found that has impacted your business so far?
How did I get into Instagram is exactly what you said. It's actually really for being able to build a personal brand that my client can see me, they can see the different achievements. I mean, it's really, and I guess that's where I have a sort of different take on and how my content has evolved over the time, is that it used to be almost like a resume of, like all your achievements, the clients you serve, the testimonials. And that's what I used to, have a bit more focus on in terms of my posting. But I guess also recently, with a bit of a change in pace of, and how I approach my business. I work really mostly on word of mouth now than Instagram as a marketing tool for my business. So it's evolved a bit, the kind of content I share. But in the beginning, it's really the whole idea of creating and focusing or putting content on it was to appear before the clients or potential clients that I have to show an existence of me online. There's something I feel quite strongly about that, especially in this day and age with the next generation. You have the Gen Zs and all. There has to be some kind of online presence that, especially when you're in this field of work. Because yeah, if you're gonna go to a restaurant today, you're gonna check their Google review, right? If you're gonna work with somebody or talk to somebody, or if you're gonna meet someone new today, like I don't know about you, but I think one of the first few things we end up exchanging is Instagram handles, and that
Smart.
yeah. So I think that is something that I'm particularly focused in, just because I feel like it's a place where you get to bring your ideas and thoughts to an almost infinite audience, right? If you know how to tell or bring your story out correctly.
Curious on the shift in structure. So it's interestingly shifted from more of like an acquisition focused content structure of here are testimonials, here are my achievements, to more of a here's a day in the life focused on retention. I wonder if that second structure may actually even be better for acquisition. Have you seen a change in how many people are coming to you from Instagram when you shifted to this new way of doing it?
It's interesting you ask that question, because it actually, while in the past there was minimal, almost no new clients I acquired through, sharing my achievements. Like it is right now where I shifted mostly to just really sharing about my raw life and sharing just content that I enjoy sharing, that has drawn more people to be interested in, what I do and what I can do for them, rather than blowing up and showing, just achievements, awards, and I think especially today, I think people are drawn to more realness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, continue to share the things that you're proud of. But I guess it's also a balance of, being able to share different aspects of your life so that you don't appear too one dimensional. And I think that's what I've been sort of learning through, social media content creation, is how do you balance out and, be able to express yourself in a way on an online platform to as big of an audience as possible, but still remain sort of real.
And as someone who doesn't use Instagram very much myself, I've been impressed by your content, but also felt like, how do you have time to do that? So, how do you have time to make these reels and these posts? How do you edit this stuff together and do everything else in life?
Well, I think the truth is that I've been quite blessed. I think being in this business for 7 years now, coming to my seventh year, I can, in the past, so much time, would have been out. Like right now, I wouldn't be talking to you because I would be like at Raffles MRT or Bayfront MRT, still doing surveys, and I'll probably stop about 10, 9:30, 10, then grab my dinner and then get back. That was used to be the lifestyle. But today I can tell you that like I have the flexibility and freedom to choose, like in terms of meeting timings, like where I put it. Of course, I do have a lot of sort of administrative work that I have to get done as well. But I guess the answer to your question is I've been able to create pockets of time in a day to be able to focus on content creation. And not only is it because it's something I enjoy doing to be able to record and, create content, but it's also something I feel like, yeah, I want to learn and be able to develop as a skill, because besides AI, I think social media content creation is, I think, two of the biggest like technological leverage for businesses or individuals today, is if you know how to use how to develop a personal brand or sort of social media content for people to find out about your brand, and then how to use AI then to develop or enhance systems that you currently have in your business. Yeah.
That is really important. And how do you think about feedback mechanisms? So, one of the things I've noticed when doing even just this podcast is there are short term feedback mechanisms. Like this got X number of views, X number of likes, but then there are also the longer term feedback mechanisms that are often what you're really trying to drive. So, for instance, getting new clients or retaining existing clients. And there sometimes can be an effect where the thing you see most immediately of likes or views is actually maybe disassociated with the thing you're trying to drive. And maybe the type of content that gets you the most views is not the type of content that's most effective for your business. But I've also found, just as a human, it's very hard not to look at those short term metrics of how many views they get, how many likes they get, and take that in as failure or success of the content. How do you think about which type of content is working, and how do you decide which content to build more of?
I'm still, discovering the answer to the question as well. I feel like it's true we can be quite driven by the statistics that are presented to us. And in fact, I mean, when I look at it, social media, TikTok, Instagram. I'm not so sure about Facebook. I don't spend too much time on Facebook, but at least for TikTok and Instagram, they give you a lot of creator insights that actually become sort of dopamine sort of drivers to uh, for you to focus on. And then you can end up sort of focusing or just optimizing for that. I think that's, yeah. I mean, it's an unfortunate sort of outcome, right? Because you sort of incentivizing the action based on giving me feedback based on that. Yeah. So I guess that's why we live in a highly sort of hook based content. Yeah, because there's this three view. So I mean, Instagram there's a view past 3 second rate. So that's something that you want to optimize for, because that's something that would drive the algorithm for you to have more views. Now, I mean, ultimately the truth is views kind of represent the viral. I mean, it's the ability for you to be able, like, as a marketer or promoter of a certain brand, that the how well you did. Yeah, so it's hard to disassociate that from what you're doing. But I guess for me, as I create and I do more content, I think about it in a way of like, is it something I still enjoy? Because it's something I want to enjoy. If I'm going to end up doing content for the sake of it and then it becomes work again, then it's like the whole cycle just repeats. Right? Yeah, but so I think, is it something I enjoy doing? And yeah, and back to that, I guess it's back to that dilemma of, do you maximize for the profits, or do you maximize for, do you focus on bringing the most value that you can as a person to the world around you? Because I think that's the interesting thing about like social media content. It can be anything, it can be everything. Yeah. And yeah, so I think the first thing is it something you enjoy, and like something I enjoy doing? Despite the views and the counts and all that, is it something I actually enjoy creating? And then the second thing is to kind of think about, yeah, what am I actually doing it for? Like, what's my intention behind this? Or is it something that I want to use to inspire? Is it something I want to use to market? Is it something I want to use to, what am I building towards? So, I mean, if you ask me today, when I look at my content, I'm really building towards being able to tell stories. Like, I think that's something I'm very curious about, is how to tell better stories through my content. Yeah, I mean, I'm yeah, documenting that process, I guess.
Love that. And I feel like it reminded me of something that stuck with me very strongly in high school in the US, where I realized there are certain things that I hate doing, and I tend to take a very long time when I need to do them. And then there are other things that I enjoy doing. And like you mentioned earlier, I'll wake up at 6 a.m. and want to start doing it. And I realized that if I push myself to doing something I hate doing, I won't go nearly as far as if I just lean into the thing that I enjoy doing. And also, hopefully, in a way that I continue to enjoy doing and not turn it into something that I dislike because it has become the goal.
Mhm.
So that enjoyment of work, I think, is really, really valuable for anyone who's leading a business, basically.
Mm.
I wanted to dive into a separate piece that I think is fascinating, which is you have this skill in growth, whether sales or marketing. How do you grow clients? How do you bring new people in? We also have a very limited capacity because you're one person, and eventually you hit a place where you can't take on new clients because you cannot handle that many with this very high touch service. How do you manage when you have reached that point? I'm sure you've reached it many times where you're at full capacity. What do you do when someone who comes to you and it's like, hey, I really want to join your thing, or particularly that?
That's a really good question as well. Man, I mean, so relevant because as we're speaking, I mean, speaking from home, right? I share office space, this office study room, right? And Jaslyn, my wife, she's actually right. She has her own little capsule beside me, so she's locked in her own call right now. So how I handle it is that, I think there are some clients that I think are better served by here, and I do end up referring Jaslyn to become the primary consultant for some of the people that get referred to me. I mean, I have hit that sort of selling before, and getting a assistant on board is something that I had done in the past. But yeah, I mean, yes, that's the only way to really scale, is to be able to delegate some of the tasks over to someone else. But what I've learned, I mean, I have to be upfront with you. I eventually let go of the PA, the personal assistant, and I'm now just, handling what my assistant used to do for me directly. I think the learning lesson is that like, you actually end up losing a bit of touch, because then now person that is serving the clients is the assistant. And I think what I learned from then having to sort of take back the duties from my previous assistant is that I think it's important who you choose to represent you. I mean, I think that's why there's a HR department company because there's a whole practice. I mean, there's a whole, uh, I think principles or I mean, there's a whole skill of finding and hiring the right people. So I think to scale this business, and I mean that's actually the practice I see of the top advisors in the industry. In fact, I mean within the same team, we have the literal top of the company in Prudential. So we work beside each other closely, and the way that I see she can do it is really just with bringing in more manpower to manage the high touch that's needed for the clients that we have to serve.
And hiring is incredibly difficult to do, really in any field, I feel. What do you think, having gone through this with a PA and then figuring out, okay, this was not the right fit, what would you do differently if you were to hire a PA again?
Wow. I think two things. One would be like my mindset about having a PA, and I think that comes from like the lack of maturity, or I mean perhaps willful ignorance that hiring a PA would solve my problems. Yeah. I think hiring someone can solve a problem in the long run, but in the short run, it actually introduces another problem.
True. True.
Yeah. So it's how do you, um, um, yeah, solve that first problem, which is training someone to represent your business, your organization in a way that is aligned with your values, aligned with your processes, aligned with your like compliance. Yeah, all that. And at the same time, I think be like increasing your skill of being a manager and being a person that has to lead someone. I mean, I guess that's my learning lesson is that yeah, perhaps I wasn't ready to have someone to lead yet at that point, but I took away a lot of lessons from the journey. And yeah, I think in terms of hiring, I see as a change of you do have to change your mindset about hiring to solve a problem, because yeah, you have a bigger problem to solve in the short term. But also I think what I would sort of do differently is back to systems, create the right system for someone else to be able to come in and run in a way that uh yeah, that it makes it easier for you to manage the person in the long run rather than more difficult. Because
Yes. It feels to me like this is very similar to automation in a way, where with automation, if you take the time to automate something that 30 seconds, it saves 24 hours or 24 minutes. If you do that early, you save a lot more time. If you do that in the last 10%, well, now you're only saving 2.5 minutes. So doing it faster pays dividends. And in a similar way, when you're onboarding someone, taking the time up front to really onboard them well gives you so much better results than taking a year or 2 years to slowly onboard them over time and have many mistakes and much work that needs to be redone. That upfront investment in certain things can be very high leverage. That's a really interesting takeaway from what you were sharing. I want to dive into running before we come to the end. We're running short on time. So let's dive into running. You've been a runner for a while, I believe. And more recently, you've been helping to pace in a run club here in Singapore. So many places I want to go with this, but maybe to start with, what have you learned from being a pacer that's informed how you are running your business as a financial advisor?
wow, never really thought about the link between being a pacer and my role as a financial consultant. But I think I guess I'll start with what I learned from joining a running community is that yeah, you really develop relationships through consistency, because if you say you're going to be there, I think, and you're there, then you develop. I think that's how community sort of develops, right? That there are few people who are consistently able to show up, and despite their maybe difficult schedules and all. I mean, in fact, the church we go to, and the group the cell group that we're in, it's a commitment by everyone to, be consistent, to show up. And
I
I
was
think,
thinking the same thing. It's such a good reminder that building a community is substantially just about do you show up regularly? And a lot of the other stuff follows.
yeah, it's being consistent in showing up. I think that's one of the foundations of a relationship, right? That you show up for people. The first part is showing up. The second, I think, is to be able to do things and step up in the area of what you're able to serve. And I guess that's where I went from, like the run. Like I ran with the run club for a couple of times, maybe 3 or 4 times, and then I was invited by one of the existing pacers to join them as a pacer. And then I felt like I was able to commit, and it's something I enjoy. So stepping up to take that position. But I mean, saying that, what I noticed in the community and why I think it's it's become what it is that, the people who are in charge have a heart of service. They are people who are willing to give more than, is necessary. Like, it's surprising. You go to a run club and you're like, this is free, this guy's not earning anything, but yet he's so committed to showing up and being there and doing things, right? You actually have to arrange. They do work with a brand partner to bring hydration to the club members. They have like tie-ups with different brands. So it's like, it's inspiring. It makes you want to stay in that community because you see someone willing to do something for, I mean, apparently like it's nothing. You are doing something for just the heart of serving a group of people. And I think that's where people will draw to you. And I think that, I mean, it applies in financial consulting as well. Where everything you do is a transaction. Like even doing things feels like you're doing it for a transaction. And I guess that's where buying gifts for birthdays, I tend to balance that out because like it can feel almost transactional if you're just doing it for the sake of, So I
Yes.
think doing more than people expect. I mean, doing what people expect or doing more than people expect can really sort of draw people to you where they're surprised or they appreciate your sacrifice, right?
It's really interesting. And it struck me also two things. One is the gift piece that if you give, like, just here's a random gift card that you give to everyone, that's harder to, it feels less personal. It's harder to have an impact and maybe even can be negative and like, oh, this person doesn't care about me. Like,
Mm.
I got an email from a dental company, I think it was, that said happy birthday. And instead of making me feel happy that they remembered me, it's like, well, I know this is an automation and it feels impersonal. And so I actually liked the dental clinic less because they were treating me so
Right.
impersonally.
Yeah, yeah, that's an
But
interesting point.
if you give a gift that is personal, it doesn't even need to be expensive to be something that means a lot. If it's something that shows like, oh, you actually thought about me, you made this specifically for me. So I think that's a really interesting piece. And then the other piece that struck me as really powerful in what you said was this element of servant leadership, of stepping up to, like you did with pacing. First you're just running, and then they say, hey, can you help out with pacing? And you did. And I think it's easy, even in volunteering or things that we do to so-called serve people, to serve ourselves. You're like, oh, I
Mm.
want to be known as a volunteer. I want to be known as this. But
Mm.
it's entirely different when there's an actual need. It's not us saying like, oh, I want to have the title of volunteer and so let me do something. But
Mm.
just seeing, oh, there's a need. Let me step up and help with it, whether
Mm.
I have some sort of recognition or not.
Mm.
Just
Mm.
helping someone out is
Mm.
such a wonderful thing.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I align a lot with that. Like it's very hard to sometimes to remove sort of intention behind the things that you do. But if you're able to and you do those things and you do that then you enjoy the things, I feel like there's a very genuine sense of enjoyment where, you are able to be in the moment and really just enjoy what you're doing without the sake of, obtaining or gaining anything out of it. The whole point is just being in that experience, right?
Yes, yes. And speaking of being in that experience, that brings us to the end of the interview. But before we end, I have what I call the lightning round. So I'll throw out a few this or that style questions. Feel free to give a brief answer, give a longer answer, either way. The first question is morning runs or evening workouts?
Morning runs or evening workouts? Wow. It's both like it sounds ideal, like run in the morning and work out in the evening. Yeah, in fact after this I'm probably gonna get a workout in. Yeah. I feel like, I mean, either way, I feel like as long as you're out, you're moving your body, I think both will serve you. So both, do both if you can.
I should have known that would be the answer for Marcus. Under promising or over delivering?
Oh, this is like under promising or over delivering. I mean, if you can over deliver, right? But I mean, manage expectations as well. But I'll say over delivering. Yeah.
Urban mile run groups or solo training?
It depends. It depends. I think it satisfies a very different part of what a run means to me. There's a very social aspect to it. So urban wilderness runs are running with a community. There's a whole human sort of like a unity of the human spirit. When you all run in the same direction for the sake of running the same direction, and you share sort of a difficult, go through a struggle together. That's a very, yeah, it feels really good. But at the same time, I think solo runs, at least for me, the way I see it, it's a almost a form of meditation and time to think. Yeah, like it's almost equivalent to a long walk. Like I do sort of long walks as well, but running is just getting more done at the same time, I guess.
As someone who hates running but loves walking, I can feel more on that second part. Yes to long walks. Second to last question. Community events or one-off coffee meetings?
Every question is I do both. I actually do both. I mean, like I do a lot of community events, lifestyle events. I get to meet new people, but I also do a lot of like one-to-one meetings with people, which I enjoy a lot. And in fact, I end up in a lot of community events that I end up having very one-to-one conversations with individuals. Yeah. Community events to connect with more people, and then one-to-one for like realness and more deeply intimate conversations.
And the last question, 6 a.m. business start or 9 a.m. business start?
Can I say 12 p.m. business start? Because the way
$100 allowed.
I've been thinking about it is like 6 a.m., 9 a.m. I feel like the morning is sacred to me. And if I can, I don't want to be opening up an email before 12. Yeah. So I do have a practice of trying to keep my morning as for me as possible. Yeah. And I guess I do have the luxury to do that.
Here you are not opening email before 12. But I
Yeah.
know you do a lot of your work through texting. Do you text before 12?
I do, yes, yeah. So I do end up, but I do have like a texting window of getting back to, like text. Interesting. In the morning, and then like, yeah, I usually only allow myself to get to the emails by at 12.
What's your texting window? Do you have like a try to respond within X hours or something?
It's not a response within X hours. I'm double checking my unread messages between, like 9 to 10 a.m. in the morning, and then there's a small window in the evening where I check my messages again. I mean, I do one check with the email in the day, so 12 p.m. I just go through the whole list of emails. Yeah.
I mean, that right there is more value than I need from an interview. I check my email constantly throughout the day, and I am in awe of the ability to only check it once. I think maybe I can go for twice, and it would actually improve my productivity because I could focus more on things.
Yeah.
But that's a good encouragement.
Yeah.
Well, before we completely end the interview, where can people go to learn more about Marcus?
I think check me out on Instagram. I think that's the main page that you can find me. That's the most active page I'm on right now. ACCRUS.
Fantastic. If you're on YouTube, that'll be below. If you're on any other podcast platform, you can find that in the show notes. Marcus, thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate you, Nate.